Hey guys, all right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to try to do the unicorn point, okay? Um, so this is part of analysis and reasoning. There are two sections to analysis and reasoning. Sourcing, so like HIP, small c, historical context, intended audience, purpose, point of view, all right? And so on the new DBQ format, if you do that a couple of times, then you can get up to 2 points. But there's an extra point if you can do the unicorn point. I call it the unicorn point because that's the sort of nickname we gave it from the AP reading because they were so stingy about giving it out. Okay. So I teach it from what I know from the AP reading from last year, the most recent update to the test, and what they were accepting. All right. So certainly, because although I'm using an AP World prompt, I'm also sharing this with my Euro students. So I'm not quite sure how Ms. Shattuck teaches it. And she may teach it differently just because of the way AP um, APUSH teaches it, but AP World and AP Euro were both the same set at the reading. We often shared people, and they graded relatively similarly. So I'm pretty sure that Euro probably was just as stingy with this point as AP World was. So I'm focusing on the way that I saw the unicorn point, the second analysis and reasoning point, being most accepted. All right. Um, because initially when they first created it, and this is if you're an oldie, if you're one of my AP World students, this is going to go straight over your head. Okay. But if you have taken AP World already, or if you took APUSH already, one of the things that they used to make you do on the DBQ was something called synthesis. And then when they changed it again for last year, they said, oh, if you do synthesis, it can count for your analysis and reasoning, your unicorn point. But when students were doing it last year, I did not see them accepting it. We would bring them essays and we're like, we think this is a 7. And they're like, no. I'm like, so it kind of burns my buttons, but I'm going to teach it a specific way just based off of what I saw. All right. So if you've been taught one way by Miss Shattuck, you're more comfortable with that way, please go for it. Okay. But I'm teaching this based off of what I know from AP World and AP Euro readers. Okay. Um, so let's briefly just go over what analysis and reasoning is, and then I'm going to do it with an actual question, okay, like an actual DBQ question, and give you some examples. So the base explanation is demonstrating a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument that addresses the question. So it's saying is you really need to understand the prompt, and you need to understand the complexities behind the prompt, and you need to use the documents to prove each other, to disprove each other, or to say kind of yes, but here are some complexities. So really, they use these three fancy words. I would avoid using them in your argument altogether. Because if you just try to throw out those words, but you don't actually corroborate, qualify, or modify, then they're just going to be annoyed. All right. So when they say corroborate, they're saying use the documents to prove how all of these documents prove each other. How does document 1 prove that document 2 are both saying blank about the prompt? And you have to reference that continuously, not just once throughout the prompt. Hey, document 1 and document 2 says this. Or, hey, I'm analyzing document 3, and this is kind of like what it said in document 4 about this as well. All right. Or to qualify, saying these are kind of similar, but here's a little bit of difference. So you could analyze document 1, move on throughout your argument, and then say, hey, document 3 is saying something similar about how Latin American societies have been changed by Christianity, but there's a little bit of a difference here. Or to modify. So you basically say your argument, but then at the end, you're like, look, even though I've been saying that documents 1, 6, and 7 have showed that there has been significant change in Latin America because of Christianity, document whatever two I didn't just mention, blank and blank, actually kind of show a contradicting perspective. Okay. So that's what it's trying to get you to do. So this is to say, this is the unicorn point is for when you're there, like when, if you really understand a prompt and you know how to analyze and interact with your documents and you know what they're saying. Okay. And so they gave you, they also kind of, the AP Central elaborates on this directive by saying, a response may demonstrate complex understanding in a variety of ways. Okay, it says explaining nuance of an issue by analyzing multiple variables. I mean, that's kind of what we just talked about up here. And that's really kind of weird. What do you mean multiple variables? So this is almost kind of confusing, and I think it kind of confuses your understanding of it when it's saying, hey, do these documents prove each other, not prove each other, whatever. Explaining both similarity and difference, or explaining continuity and change, explaining multiple causes, or explaining both cause and effect. I think it's trying to say is when you're planning your essay and when you're talking about it, you're only going to really be able to effectively prove a complex argument if you organize your writing in a specific way. All right. So, depending on what your prompt is, I mean, you may want to see similarities and differences, continuity and changes, or cause and effect. So, the one we're going to do, it says evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America. All right. So, if you wanted a way, you could say similarities and differences insofar as here are some similar ways that they all impacted Native American societies, Christianity did, but here are some differences depending on what we see, that in some regions they really follow Christianity really well, or in some regions they don't. And from there, you can use the documents to say, look, all of these documents are proving that a lot of regions saw that Native Americans were practicing Christianity to some extent, but still integrating Native practices. Okay, so they're basically trying to say, if you want the unicorn point, you can't just laundry list through your documents. You have to have a complex argument. You have to be kind of comparing similarities and differences, or continuity and change, or cause and effect. All right. So, I mean, to be able to have an complex understanding of the argument, you have to set up your essay in a significant way. Okay. I did this, I crossed this out, explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across periods. This used to be the synthesis point. You used to get a significant point for doing synthesis. They didn't used to have the unicorn point. Last year was the first year rolling out the unicorn point. Before, it used to be synthesis, which was explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across periods. I don't think you should try this because last year at the AP reading, they weren't accepting it, even though we're like, you kind of told us that students could use synthesis for the unicorn point. And they're like, yeah, we don't like the way students are doing it. They're not doing it right. So I'm going to recommend you don't do this because they never accepted it when we found it in essays, even when it was done well. So I am not recommending you try this. These two are really what I would focus on, and they're kind of similar. Green being probably the easiest way to go about it, and the orange is like the same thing, but also adding in authors. So it says confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes. It's worded really weirdly, okay? It's trying to say, hey, whatever point I'm making, this is valid. Because look at, we've got a Spanish person saying something about Christianization of natives, and then you've got a native person. So, and we see them and they're both agreeing, so clearly it's correct. All right. This is saying the same thing, but it's just not necessarily saying it needs to be like theme based. They use a lot of these weird highbrow words to try to explain the rubric to you, but I think it kind of confuses students more. Qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse or alternative views or evidence must be part of the argument, not merely a phrase or reference. That part is important to understand. When you guys are doing this, you can't just say one time, hey, document 1 proves document 2 because blank, and then that's your only comparison. Throughout the essay, you have to be showing how these documents agree, disagree, or kind of play off of one another. You have to be doing it perpetually. It's not just like a, hey, shout out, okay? So, this is much more effective to teach the unicorn point with an actual example, okay? So we're gonna do it with a DBQ that says, evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America in the period to 1500 to 1800, okay? So, I have already created my own cheat sheet. I'm going to quickly go through each document. You're free to pause the video and read the documents for yourself and then listen to how I summarize them, okay? But I'm just going to summarize them real quick. So document 1, the author is a person of mixed descent. They're Amerindian and European. And he's at a trial and he's confessing that, yes, sorry, I participated in native dances, which again is against the Christian religion. Sorry. Okay. Document 2 is these pictures, and it's saying that the author of these pictures is of Incan ancestry, but he is a Christian. And the pictures are basically the same thing, except you add in like a little Jesus there, all right? And this is probably, not little Jesus, sorry, excuse me, Adam and Eve, all right? And you've got a few kids and a little bit more like probably Christian imagery or new imagery now, because I mean, they didn't really have probably a ton of chickens. We talked about once in class saying that like possibly chickens. Nope, that was the potato. Wait, but that was also the chickens. I don't know. Most scholarship says chickens were not in Native America before Europe. Okay, there was some weird oddball newspaper I feel like I read that said something about possibly they came over with the Polynesians. That could be true, but I don't think chickens became widespread still. So largely chickens came with the Spaniards. So we see some Spanish stuff here, okay, and more birds, etc. Okay, what this is showing us is a person of Incan descent is using native imagery to now portray Christian themes. That's understandable in a way to them, okay? I'm going to sneeze, excuse me. One more. Yep, okay, that's it. Document 3 is from a Catholic priest to aid other priests in helping Native Americans be more Christian. And basically he is saying, yeah, really, it's been really hard to convert the natives. It's been really hard to get them to get rid of their idols. And now the biggest problem is that they are mixing and matching Christian stuff with native stuff. This is that word syncretism, all right? Blending Native American stuff, Amerindian stuff with Christian stuff to help them understand it, okay? Document 4, the author is Amerindian, okay? And he is saying, hey, yeah, you're right. The elders still do sacrifices, and then they go and pray to Our Lady, which is probably like Mary or something like that. And they know that they're doing bad stuff because they have guards to watch out for Spaniards so they don't get in trouble for it. Document 5 says the author's a captain, and it's of the Inquisition. He's a Spaniard, all right? Or at least, I don't know if he's directly from Spain. Maybe he was born in Rio de Janeiro, but he's probably white still, at least, okay? And it's against a black woman, a free black woman, okay? But still, there's going to be some inherent biases there. Either way, he's saying, yes, I did see her doing heathenistic sort of practices, probably traditional African religious ceremonies, okay? Document 6 is it's really Christian. We don't really see anything in here that's like where they're using native beliefs or native practices. The major difference is the saint is essentially African. All right. So this is a way in which a native is conforming to Orthodox Christian beliefs, but just making the statues and the saints more applicable to them because they look like them. And then the last one, document 7, the author is an emissary from Spain, so he's like a Spanish person. Okay. And I think up here I called him white just because he's from Spain. He's Spanish, excuse me. Okay. He is Spanish. The captain. Okay. But anyway, back to down on 7, Feliz de Azara. He's also directly from Spain, direct European dude. Okay. And he is basically saying, yeah, the Amerindians here are really bad at being good Christians. They're just kind of singing stuff and doing stuff, which isn't really truly Christian. And the Jesuits aren't really good at teaching them this stuff because they're not great at it either. They're not very well read either. Okay. So these are what all of the documents have. And this is something that I did like 5 minutes or 10 minutes during your reading period. So you're already supposed to be doing that as part of your reading period. And then you start down and you go bada bing, bada boom, write this out now in 35 minutes because you have 45 minutes. And of course, there'd be 2 less documents for your upcoming AP exam. But once you know, if you write down really quick, you can see with my notes, I wrote the document, I wrote something about their author, and then I wrote a really quick blurb about what it's saying. And now from here, I can plan an essay. I can say all of these except for document 6 really is saying that Amerindian culture is still permeating to some extent. But I can also say all of these documents show that Christianity has significantly changed and is a part of Native life, even if it's not a fully Orthodox following of Christianity. Okay. So now that I understand what my argument is, because remember the prompt is saying extent to which Christianity changed societies. I know I am saying that Christianity fully permeated Amerindian culture. Christianity is ingrained in Latin America, okay? And it changed Latin American or Native societies because it's there. But at the same time, not all Amerindians fully fully followed Christianity exactly, and still the elders are kind of doing whatever they want, all right? Now, maybe this will help us understand how to unicorn point a little bit better, okay? So if we're looking at the orange one, confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives, such as explaining how different documents corroborate argument in spite of the differing perspective of the authors. So I am saying, look, documents 2, the one with the Inca who did like the Adam and Eve, document 3, the Catholic priest who is saying natives are mixing and matching Christian and Amerindian stuff. Document 4, the native who is saying, hey, the elders are still doing sacrifices and then worshiping Christian stuff. And document 7, the emissary who is saying they're kind of doing Christian stuff, but not really at all. All of these prove syncretism. All of these prove that agree with one another that Amerindians are mixing and matching Christian and Native belief, despite the fact that document 2 and 4 are from natives. And despite the fact that 3 or 4 are from European priests, all right, even though the authors from these 2 sides are vastly different, they're both saying the same thing. Okay. So I would, when I'm writing, as I'm doing, if I would somewhere, I would have to say that. And then I could also say too that document 1 and 5 both prove that natives are still practicing native beliefs despite how ingrained Christianity is, especially despite that these court cases are having two very different social status people testifying. One, a native confessing against himself, and two, a Spanish European. All right, let's do Spaniard. A Spaniard who, of course, is giving testimony against a black woman. And that is significant because he could have a significant bias against her because, I mean, there's a lot of racism. And so, I mean, they might blow out in proportionality of what she was doing and be like, oh my God, she's doing heathen, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Especially since she's a free black woman as well. And despite these two, like one, probably someone who has a racist attitude towards people of color, and then one person who is a person of color, they are still saying, yeah, still holding on to native beliefs. Okay. Now, there are still complexities within that, which you could just say, I mean, are we're not going to get into it, but because that's more of sourcing and stuff like that. So you would want to kind of have developed a developed conversation, more than just mentioning it once, more than just one sentence. Okay. Oh, sorry, my leg was folded under me weird. But once again, this is kind of hard to perpetuate through an entire essay. So the easiest one is, once again, this idea of just in general explaining how certain documents either agree with one another, corroborate, mostly agree with one another, but with some exceptions, qualify, and then modify. This one or two disproves all of the other in my argument, and it's important to note, but I still believe XYZ. Okay. So, to support a nuanced argument that religious syncretism was the most important fact of the spread of Christianity in Latin America, the response uses the direct evidence of syncretic beliefs and practices. Pause. So it's saying, to get the unicorn point, your argument could be trying to show, first off, your thesis would be something about the extent to which Christianity changed societies is that there was significant continuing religious syncretism. That's your argument. But you have to prove that argument using nuance by saying, hey, documents 2, 3, and 4 proves, confirms, verifies each other, and you'd have to explain that. And also too, like you would say, hey, document 7 is also kind of proving this, and it's showing that limited numbers of priests means the Native Americans were frequently left to interpret Christian teachings within the framework of their own religious traditions, which is why this syncretism happens. So you're saying, yes, these documents prove each other and prove my argument of syncretism, and here's why syncretism happens, because this is what document 7 says. Okay. Another way that you could do it, that's not like one way that you can do it, the response presents an argument that recognizes complexity by pointing out, also I'm getting, and then I added some detail, these examples from the AP's guideline to like scoring this. All right, so this is what an AP person question former response would have liked to see to give the point. All right, so I'm not just coming up with this out of nowhere. Okay. The response presents an argument that recognizes complexity by pointing out that even though the Spanish were fairly successful in spreading Christian ideas through coercion, missionaries, and promoting widespread conversion, they were limited in their ability to enforce Orthodox doctrine and eliminate indigenous religious beliefs. So once again, it wants document interplay. It wants you to say, hey, we are seeing that document 6 and document 2 are both court cases about how natives are practicing native beliefs, which means they're trying to force natives to follow Christianity. And document 3 is basic, wait, not document 3, excuse me. Document 4 is a native testifying against his elders, which show that this legal and coercive way of action is working because this guy's ratting out his elders, all right? And on top of that, too, not only are they using coercion, yes, there are still missionaries because document 1 is talking about a priest, and document 7 it is also using a priest. So those two are showing priests helping this out. And I mean, the success is shown in document 6 because it's a picture and it's like very Orthodox Christian scenery, despite using a person of color, because that just is their way of trying to make the religion applicable to them. But it's still following all the doctrines, the teachings, they're giving up polytheism, etc. So you're continually using the documents to prove a point together as a whole. You're not just separately referencing each document to the argument, which you do need to do, but then you need to connect them all together. So a response that qualifies or modifies an argument. So remember, a response that's saying yes, but, all right? So it's claiming that Christianity, so another way you can go about this is saying Christianity, sorry. God bless America. I can't speak. It's 4 o'clock. Christianity only superficially changes the religious beliefs of Latin American societies. So it's saying that Christianity kind of only on the outside changes like what it looks like they're practicing. Wait, hold on. Oh, I think I guess what I was trying to say. It's okay. So it's trying to say that Spaniards, like in document 3 and document 7, are saying these natives are only doing it on the outside. So it's saying Spaniards think that Amerindians, natives, aren't truly following Christian beliefs. But because of their background, that's overlooking how deeply Christian practices have been embedded in these communities. They're making, like we see in document 6, an entire saint and then a statue with it. And I mean, if we look at document 2, you have the Adam and Eve picture. So Spaniards, like in document 3 and document 7, don't believe the change is happening because it's not how they expect to see it. But the change is actually there, even though the religious practices aren't the accepted standard of belief. Okay, I think that's what it's trying to say. So once again, as you're analyzing the documents, you have to have this complex argument saying, well, hey, document 2 is showing this change is happening, even though in document 7, he says, oh, it's not real, it's on the face value. And you'd say, but no, even though, I mean, document 1 and document 4 says that natives are still doing sacrifices or dances. I mean, after these sacrifices, they're still doing Christian devotional songs, and it still holds true to them, even though it's not in the way that the people from document 7 and document 4 wish it to be. So the change is still there. But you see how just in talking to you, I'm referencing the documents back and forth. So you have to analyze, so summarize and relate to the prompt each document individually to get your summary and analysis points for those points. But to get the unicorn point, after you do that kind of in the paragraphs, you need to relate these documents together to a more complex argument. Okay. That's largely the best way I can go about teaching it. I'm hoping this example helped. Once again, all of this language that the AP use is really conflated and really fluffy and kind of annoying. So I think really the best way about thinking it is document interplay and a complex argument perpetually throughout your essay. You analyze these documents individually and then relate them back to how are they proving, disproving, or working together to prove a complex understanding of your argument in the prompt. Okay. Hopefully that helps. It's a really hard point to get. It's really hard. Um, I mean, I definitely think some of you can do it. Some of you have been doing it. But hopefully this helps. If you have any further questions from it, please feel free to Edsby me. But that's all I got from you. Ta-ta!